The relationship between Max Verstappen and his race engineer Giampiero Lambiase was, I'd say, the most interesting part of Sunday's Spa race, with a very few interesting conversations between the two. Lambiase basically scolded Verstappen, which is a rare sight to happen to a driver who always wants to push it to the limit. But is there something behind the scenes here? And what do these radio scoldings from Lambiase tell us? So join us as we take a look at the relationship between Max and his race engineer. Verstappen finished the Belgium Grand Prix 22.3 seconds ahead of Sergio Perez. Perez initially claimed the lead with ease after starting on the front row with Charles Leclerc due to Verstappen's 5-place grid penalty for changing his gearbox. However, as Verstappen ascended through the ranks, Perez found it increasingly difficult to maintain his position. Despite Perez's efforts, he couldn't offer much resistance. Once Verstappen managed to overtake Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, he started steadily eroding Perez's lead, eventually taking over on lap 17. Now, this year's climb to the top was slower compared to his dramatic rise from 14th to 1st within 12 laps in 2022, but it was nonetheless predictable that Verstappen would bulldoze his way to the lead once more. Even if Verstappen had started from the pit lane, his victory would have seemed very likely. The Dutchman did experience a brief scare during a mid-race spell of rain that made the track slippery and led to a sudden oversteer at Eau Rouge. In Verstappen's words, the track was slightly more slippery than I anticipated. These things happen and you instantly try to adjust. Sometimes you succeed, other times not so much. Fortunately, at such high speeds, the car generates significant downforce. But the most interesting part of the race wasn't happening on the track, but rather via the radio communications with the race leader and his race engineer. You probably heard Giampiero Lambiase trying to scold his driver Max Verstappen for using his new tyres too hard going into the third stint of the 2023 Belgian Grand Prix. "You used a lot of the tyre on the outlap, Max. Not sure that was sensible." Then a minute or so after no reply, "There was reasonable deg in the last stint. I advise you to use your head a bit more." This was just the latest in a series of minor issues that have seemed to multiply as they become more familiar with each other since they began their collaboration in Barcelona in 2016. Giampiero Lambiase was brought in from Force India to Red Bull midway through the 2014 season after team principal Christian Horner got wind that Lambiase had a pragmatic and a very assertive personality, perfectly suited to replace Guillaume Rochlin as Sebastian Vettel's race engineer following Rochlin's promotion. After the conventional interview, Lambiase was subjected to rigorous questioning by Vettel himself. He left a solid impression on everyone, Vettel included. However, Vettel later moved to Ferrari and Lambiase was tasked with engineering Danny Kvyat's Red Bull. This continued until Kvyat was replaced by the young prodigy Max Verstappen after a little over a season. Hence, Lambiase has personally observed the transition from raw talent to one of the sport's all-time greats, and it's highly probable that he played a role in this evolution. Despite this, the dynamic between Lambiase and Verstappen has remained largely unchanged. Max still occasionally the wayward youngster, and Lambiase the strict elder brother figure, ensuring Max doesn't recklessly jeopardize their win, regardless of the number of victories already under their belt. Max enjoys this dynamic, taking pleasure in teasing the figure of authority, very confident of his own capabilities, aware of his boundaries, and knowing his antics make Lambiase nervous. But the playful atmosphere can turn serious in a split second, particularly when a decision crucial to the competition needs to be made. Max can even switch from light-hearted mischief to fury if things aren't going according to plan, with Lambiase often bearing the brunt of it. They both give as well as they get. Max tends to move on quickly from such incidents, Horner stated, while Lambiase tends to hold on to them a bit longer. This was evident when Verstappen's frustration boiled over in the Q2 segment of the qualifying round on Friday, as a drying track and conflicting issues between battery charge and tyre temperatures nearly resulted in them missing out on Q3. "Okay, well, if you want to decide the tyre offset, the run plan, the traffic gaps, we can do that for Q3, responded Lambiase, giving it back just as hard as Verstappen had given it out. After then going fastest in Q3 by around 0.9 seconds, Max was apologetic for his earlier tone. "I'm just about getting used to it," his comedy foil replied. Another notch in the history book secured. In the opening phase of the main race, there wasn't much need for communication as Verstappen, starting from the 6th spot due to his penalty, cautiously began moving up the field, a strategy reminiscent of last year at this circuit. Even when stuck in a DRS train, Verstappen stayed patient, with Hamilton picking up DRS from Leclerc, blocking Verstappen's attempts to slipstream ahead. Verstappen instead depleted Hamilton's battery reserves by making him use it defensively over a few laps. He then passed him easily with DRS before Leclerc on lap 6, putting him in third, 3.9 seconds behind his leading teammate Perez, but lapping up to 0.5 seconds quicker on the same soft compound tyres. 3 laps later, he bravely overtook Leclerc around the outside of Leclerc at a much faster speed, with Perez only 3 seconds ahead. The dialogue with Lambiase started now. As with all drivers and their race engineers, they'd undoubtedly reviewed multiple race scenarios and how to respond, hence their conversation was somewhat coded. The likely subject was how to overtake the other Red Bull. In terms of pure strategy, the easiest way was to pit first and gain the advantage by undercutting now that he was close enough. But prioritising the car in second place for a pit stop over Perez could lead to friction within the team. Given Verstappen's pace, it seemed inevitable that he'd overtake Perez on the track, either before or after the initial pit stops. Further complications arose over whether it was a 1 or 2 stop race. The soft tyres degradation was better than expected, and wear wasn't an issue. If it was a 1-stop race, they weren't near the first stop, and Max would likely be free to overtake Perez. If it was a 2-stop race, they were right at the point of the first stops. They might overtake without risking wheel-to-wheel, but it would pose a different kind of risk for the team. The impending rain, expected in around 10 minutes, nudged them towards a longer first stint. The rain wasn't heavy enough to warrant intermediate tyres, but the later they could stop, the fresher their new tyres would be when the rain hit. On several occasions, Lambiase had already warned Max to use your head please, without referring to something specific. "Are we doing it or what?" Max had inquired. Lambiase invited him to simply follow orders. Max expressed a desire to understand both sides, only to be told once more to follow instructions, and this showed a definite tension in their conversation. Verstappen, after his 45th win, jokingly admitted in the press conference that he enjoys making the team nervous with his suggestions for an additional pit stop and appreciates their familiar refusal. He acknowledged their solid relationship. He beat Perez by 22 seconds and Leclerc by half a minute. His victory margin could have been significantly larger, similar to the previous year's race. Verstappen admitted to slowing down, considering the significant wear on the tyres caused by the challenging track, and decided to avoid unnecessary risks. His performance, although seemingly perilous to Lambiase, was noted as exceptional by Horner, liking it to a once-in-a-generation talent. Horner praised Verstappen's ability to read a tyre, read a race, and extract everything from it, asserting that he's currently at the peak of his form. What stands out in the relationship between Lambiase and Verstappen, in my opinion, is that they need so few words to say so much. When something technical is needed, Lambiase uses command mode and Verstappen knows what to do. When Lambiase needs feedback from Verstappen, a few words about tyres or weather is enough. And when they get a bit bored or relaxed, we get comedy while driving at 300 km/h. I'm not sure what we're witnessing here. Maybe it'll become more clear in a few years from now. The RB19 is the very best car on the grid right now, miles ahead of the rest. But the level that Verstappen is driving right now is unmatched too, in my opinion. The last race I can remember both RB and Verstappen making costly mistakes was probably Singapore 2022. His confidence in damp conditions say it all. Even the tank slapper is no reason for him to take it easy. He saves the car and his day and then gets on with it. The level of consistency and the drive to annihilate everything and everyone every race is deep within this one. Perez has no chance, none whatsoever, to ever reach that level of consistency and speed. And the rest, unless they get a superior car, will have to hope for those tiny moments when both the team and the driver have an off day, which will rarely happen. Until then, Verstappen and his RB19 will be unstoppable.